Hey guys, if you guys, this is a review of all of the different methods that we have kind of gone over here for factoring. So this is attached online if you guys want to print it out. I don't know what happened with the GCF there, but we're just gonna go with it. So kind of just an organizer to kind of help you guys kind of summarize everything we've done this unit. So we're going to kind of go in order of how we first started. And we first started with first looking for a GCF. So this is really like always, no matter what method we're looking at, this should always be your first step. And then you can go from there. Now, this may be like your stopping point, like a lot of the problems on your study guide. We stopped after finding the GCF, but oftentimes you're going to keep going forward. So always look for a greatest common factor first. And then we go, so we went into 4 terms. 4 terms, remember, was we factor by grouping. So that method was our grouping method. So I'm going to give you guys an example in this box here. Now I'm going to move it over and zoom in so I can focus just on this one. Okay, so when you have 4 terms, an example would be something like this. So 2a cubed minus a squared b plus 10a minus 5b. So the first thing I do is look to see, is there a GCF? So 2, no. Do they all have an A? No. Do they all have a B? No. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor by grouping. So I'm going to look at my first 2 terms, and that's my first group. And then I'm going to look at my last 2 terms, and that's my second group. So I'm going to look at 2a cubed minus a squared b, and I'm going to factor out a GCF. So 2, there's not a number, so I go to the variables. Okay, a and an a, so I can factor out an a. This has 2 a's, this has 3. I always factor out the smaller amount, so a squared. And then this has a b, but this doesn't. So a squared is my only GCF there. So when I divide by a squared, so 2a cubed divided by a squared gets me 2a. And then a squared divided by b just gets me b. Remember, you always want to bring down your middle sign. So my middle sign here is 10. So I'm going to bring, or a positive, so I'm going to bring down that positive. Sorry, not 10, positive sign. Okay, and then I look at 10a and 5b. So 10 and 5, I think, is there a number that divides evenly into both 10 and 5? And I always look at my smaller number first. Does 5 go into 10? And it does. So we can pull out a 5. And then this has an A, but this doesn't. And this has a B, but this doesn't. So that's all I can do. 10A divided by 5 is 2A. And 5B divided by 5 is negative B. Now remember, for this to work, these have to be the same. And so since those are the same, we can write it as 1. And so that's 2a minus b. And then we write as one factor what's left. A squared plus 5. And that's it. That's my final answer. Now remember, you guys can write this any way that you want. This is the right answer, or you can write it as a squared plus 5 times 2a minus b. And that is factoring by grouping. So after we talked about factoring by grouping, we moved and talked about when there are 3 terms. So something like this, ax squared plus bx plus c. Now we started when a was greater than 1. So I'm going to do that here. So when a and then we went into when a is equal to 1. Now, we really didn't have to split these up, but I wanted to remind you guys of the shortcut when a is equal to 1. So remember, we use the x method and we split the middle term. So an example of when a is greater than 1 would be something like this. So 30x squared minus 27x plus 6. Now, what's the first thing we always want to think about when we're looking for a GCF? And if you're saying, or what's the first thing we want to think about? I said it. I said the answer. What's the first thing we want to think about when we're factoring? And if you said GCF, you would be right. So what is a GCF between 30, 27, and 6? Well, I look at 6 and think, does 6 go evenly into 27? It doesn't, so I have to think smaller. What about 3? Yes, yes, yes. So I can factor out a 3, and I'd be left with 10x squared minus 9x plus 2. So then I can use, I'm going to draw an x here. And so then I use the x. So remember, on top is a times c, so 10 times 2, which is 20. And on bottom is my b term, negative 9. So I'm thinking, what two numbers multiply together to get me positive 20 and add to get me negative 9? That's going to be negative 4 and negative 5. So that's when we split the middle term. Negative 9x is going to be split up. Now we're going to keep that 3, and we're going to rewrite this. So it's going to be 10x squared. What do I want to put with 10? 5 or 4? I want to put 5 with it. Doesn't matter though. Minus 4x plus 2. So now I'm at the same spot I was over here. I can factor by grouping. 4 terms, always factor by grouping. So 10x squared minus 5x, I can factor out a 5x, and I'm left with 10 divided by 5 is 2, and x squared divided by x is x. And then negative 5x divided by 5x is negative 1. I bring down my middle sign, so I have to bring down that negative, which means both of my signs in here are going to change. So I think, what divides evenly into 4x and 2? And that's 2. And so then I'd be left with negative 4x divided by negative 2 is positive 2x. And 2 divided by negative 2 is negative 1. So again, just like with grouping, these have to be the same, which they are. And so we can write that as 1. 2x minus 1 times 5x minus 2. Don't forget that GCF from the beginning, 3. And so that is my final answer. Okay, now you can use the exact same thing we did when a is equal to 1. However, I'm going to show you there's also the shortcut. So I'm not going to put in a GCF 1. I'm just going to put in x squared minus x minus 42. So when a is equal to 1, we still start the same. I mean, we'd first look for a GCF, but I told you I wasn't going to put a GCF 1 in this. So we're going to start the same. We're going to start with our x. On top is the same thing, 1 times negative 42, which is just negative 42. And on bottom is going to be the negative 1. So we're thinking, what two numbers multiply together to get me negative 42 and add to get me negative 1? So we're maybe looking at our factoring, our 15 by 50 multiplication chart. We're going through what numbers multiply together to get me negative 42 and add to get me negative 1. And that would be positive 6 and negative 7. So only when a is equal to 1 can we use the shortcut. We can go just straight to x plus 6 and x minus 7. And that is my final answer. So only when a is equal to 1 can we use the shortcut. Okay, and our last method, and this was the last thing we did, was two terms. So for it to be two terms, the first thing we want to make sure is it subtracting in between, and are both terms perfect squares? So if it is, then we're going to use the difference of squares method. So let's say I had 81x squared minus 16. So they're subtracting in between. 81x squared is a perfect square. 16 is a perfect square. And so I can factor using a difference of squares. I think, what's the square root of 81x squared? And that's 9x. And what's the square root of 16? 4. So I can then rewrite this with my two parentheses, 9x, 9x, and then 4 and 4, 1's plus, 1's minus. And that's my final answer. Now we can do another one. Let's say I had 18m squared n minus 2n cubed. And you're looking at that and you're like, well, there's two terms, but neither one of these is a perfect square. But they do have a GCF. 18 and 2, there's a number that goes in evenly into both of those, which is 2. This has an m, but this doesn't, so there's nothing we can do with that. But this has an n and this has an n, so we can actually factor out 2n. And I'd be left with 9m squared, no more n because n divided by n is 1, minus 2 divided by 2 is 1, and n cubed divided by n is n squared. So now I look at my inside and I think, is that a perfect square? Well, 9m squared is a perfect square, n squared is a perfect square. So it is. I can do a difference of squares here. Square root of 9m squared is 3m, and the square root of n squared is n. So then I can write my two parentheses, 3m and 3m, and then n and n, 1's plus, 1's minus, and then don't forget to bring down your GCF, and that is your final answer. And that's it. So that summarizes all of the methods that we learned for factoring. So just kind of a quick review for you guys. Hopefully that helps and kind of prepares you for our upcoming test. I hope you guys have a great day. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Drop into office hours. Email me, whatever you guys need. Happy to help. Hope you guys are all doing well. Have a good day.